Hey everyone, Matt Bove here for another episode of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. If you're watching the video, you can see I'm still in Fort Lauderdale. If you are listening to the audio, I apologize. I'm doing this off a microphone on a headphone. I know that this is not the greatest quality, but I wanted to get something up today before I head back to Buffalo because I had a little bit of time here. We're just kind of sitting at a coffee shop waiting for our flight to get closer to leaving. We didn't leave until like 7 o'clock on Friday evening, which makes no sense. I have no idea what I was thinking when I booked this all of those months ago, but here we are. We're going to start doing this more often. Some of these quicker little episodes. We did one after the game last night. I know it's just me, so if you're tuning in to hear Sal or listen to Sal, it's just going to be me for this one. He's got some stuff going on, but we wanted to make sure that we get you updates when they happen. And today the big update for the Bills following their win on Thursday night is that Terrel Bernard's injury is maybe not as significant as we originally thought. So according to multiple reports, Kyle Brandt, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, it sounds like this is going to be an injury that causes Bernard to miss around a month. Now, from what I understand, not a doctor at all. Shout out like Banged Up Bills, Thigh Doctor, some of the accounts on social media that are really, really informative about breaking down these injuries. There are different levels of strains. We do not know the level of strain Terrel Bernard has. It seems like on the low end, it's a 2 to 3 week injury. The middle range is like 4 to 6 weeks. And then the furthest part is something that would cause you to miss several months. Once again, I don't know, but it feels like maybe that's what Daquan Jones was dealing with when he had the injury last year, and Terrel Bernard's does not seem as serious as that. So, yeah, they're going to be without him for like a month, and that's going to be really hard to overcome. But I think having him for the second half of the season and potentially a push to the playoffs or in the playoffs is what's ultimately most important. I also think that Balen Spector and Dorian Williams did an okay job against the Dolphins, and that's a team that presents a lot of potential mismatches because of their speed, because of the weapons they have offensively. So I think when I heard Terrel Bernard was going to miss a month, I think that's good news if you're a Bills fan. I know that's still a significant amount of time, but having him available down the stretch, maybe the same time that, well, Taron Johnson sounds like he's going to come back sooner than that, but then also maybe you're getting Matt Milano in that same range or a little bit after that. Like, talk about reloading at the right time of the season, and it feels like maybe that's what the Bills will be able to do. Speaking of Taron Johnson, we did talk to Sean McDermott today. He's back in Buffalo. He told us that they didn't put Taron Johnson on IR because they think that his injury might be on the shorter end of what would have been a 4-week miss for him if he went on IR. That's the minimum, which is a good sign to me. Maybe it's still a little bit lofty to think that he could. I guess that's the problem when you're recording something outside. Maybe it's a little lofty to think Taron Johnson will be available for the Monday Night Football game against the Jags in like a week and a half. But if he's available for the next game, the trip to Baltimore, or any of those games, the really 3 hard games the Bills have as they kind of end this first 6-game stretch of the season, I think that would also be kind of the best-case scenario for another one of the Bills' premier players. But seriously, like, shout out the guys who have needed to fill in. I think as we've kind of come a little bit further away from the game last night, I'm recording this at like 4:30 p.m., as we've had a little bit of time to reflect, those guys that stepped up are what the big story for this game is to me. Like, Jamarcus Ingram was exceptional in this game. Like, that dude can just flat out play. I don't know how you get him on the field more than you do already, but he should probably be out there more. The issue for the Bills, and this is a really good problem to have, you're not taking Christian Benford off the field. You're not taking Rasul Douglas off the field if you don't have to. So you just kind of got to find ways to use Jamarcus Ingram because he's made plays, and I think that they really trust him, and that's really impressive considering he's an undrafted guy from UB. He was somebody who was just fighting and clawing to make his way even into an NFL camp. He made his debut in Miami on that day where everybody was feeling like the results of the Heat. That's when he made his NFL debut. So it's interesting how 2 years later he comes back to the same stadium and just absolutely lights it up. So I thought he was impressive. Like I said before, I thought Spector was good, or at least played well. Same thing with Dorian Williams for sure. Cam Lewis has done a nice job in the last game and a half filling in for Taron Johnson. So I do think there are a lot of positives from those guys that are a little bit further down the depth chart. And the one thing that I've kept thinking about is that for so long we were so used to the same core of this team. And that's not a problem. You always had the guys, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano. Like, there were all of these guys who were just around for a while that unless there was an injury, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for guys behind them to try and make a name for themselves. That's what we're seeing right now. A team that does not have a ton of established, locked-in starters, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and these players getting an opportunity to go out and show what they can do, and who knows what they ultimately turn into. It's kind of what we saw with Terrel Bernard last year when Tremaine Edmonds left. We didn't know who was going to step up. He was the guy that stepped up. Maybe this year we're going to see something similar with one of those players that we previously mentioned, or maybe a guy that we haven't even talked about. So I was thinking about that a little bit today, and just how they do have more talent on the back end of their roster than I think they probably get credit for. Cole Bishop only got a handful of snaps at the end of the game. That pass breakup in the end zone, though, was nice. He feels like a player that Sean McDermott will be able to get a lot out of. It was his first NFL action. He has so much to learn, but I think he is a player that they could utilize in a lot of different ways. If they go a lot of dime and they have another defensive back on the field, maybe he's a guy that they kind of bring out there. Maybe he's somebody who could be, the person to cover a tight end if you think that he can run with that particular player or that particular matchup each week. So I think they've got some options. Also didn't talk about this last night, but forgive me, it was like 2:30 in the morning. Von Miller has looked pretty good. Von Miller won some of his pass rush attempts, was getting to the quarterback fast. On his sack, he got there in like 2.5 seconds. I know it was Skylar Thompson, but still, that is a ridiculously quick way of getting to the quarterback. He was getting to Tua. He had a spin move around Austin Jackson that was just lethal. It looked like Von Miller. And I know we've said that before, so I don't want to sound like a broken record. But Von Miller looks like the guy who was healthy 2 years ago, much more than he looks like the guy who really didn't have it a year ago. And we all said, hey, give the Bills 5 or 6 sacks. That feels like a win, all things considered. I mean, he's already got 2, right? It feels like he's probably going to be flirting with double-digit sacks if he's able to stay healthy. And I think the fact that they're limiting his snaps is giving him more juice when he is ultimately on the field. So I think that that's a good sign. I also think we haven't seen them with Smoot yet, and Smoot had a very strong summer. So I think he's another player who could elevate the other guys on the line. I think that they can move Smoot inside on obvious pass rush situations, and that will let Von even probably be able to have more favorable matchups with some of the creative looks that they have defensively. So I do think that the defensive line has had glimpses of strong play. It has not been maybe as consistent from a pressure standpoint as you would like to see. But overall, I do think that they've flashed at times, especially Greg Rousseau, obviously, as the huge first game against the Cardinals. It was not as dynamic of a game against the Dolphins, but he had a nice play, stopping Skylar Thompson, catching him from behind to force the one turnover on downs. He's great in run coverage. He is so good at peeling off of his blockers and setting the edge. He's just a really all-around good player. Ed Oliver, of course, had the massive stop for turnover on downs. We saw Ed flash. Ed did not have the best first game of the season, but he looked a lot more like Ed Oliver in week 2, which is a really good sign for the Bills moving forward. I know we haven't really talked about the offense a lot. I posted the quick episode last night, and I said that I wasn't overly impressed with the offense. I said there were a couple plays that really stood out. That's not a bad thing. I think some people took that as like a knock on the offense. They just didn't have to do that much. Basically, the entire second half, it was turn around, hand it off, two plays, and then if you needed to try and make a first down, you were going to throw the ball, and if you didn't get it, you were going to punt, because you were just not trying to make a mistake and just making sure that you were taking time off of the clock. So they really only had to do stuff for the first half, and in the first half, they were starting with really favorable field position. 17 points came off turnovers. Offensively, then you add in another 7 from the pick 6, and just like that, you get to 24. So there was only 7 other points from that. They obviously had the missed field goal. So that's really kind of the story of the day for the offense. They were totally fine. It was not a superstar performance from Josh Allen. There were superstar moments, definitely. The throw to Ty Johnson was ridiculous. The throw to Khalil Shakir, the one that actually Poyer took the penalty on, was a seed. So there were times that the offense looked good, but they didn't have to do it consistently the whole game. And that's a good sign that the defense was able to kind of put the weight on their shoulders in this game and do enough to get the win. The only negative really from the game is the Terrel Bernard injury. And once again, we're talking about Tyler Bass. That was an ugly miss. Tyler Bass's kick was not even close. And I think for him, it's all about confidence. And to see that one go through would have probably given him a bit of confidence. Now he's going to be thinking about the miss at the end of the game, and it's how do you overcome that? Because they're going to need him at some point in the season. And he has been good on the extra points. He hadn't missed a field goal until that one. But from a percentage standpoint, it's just not good enough. You got to be better with field goal percentage than he has been, and it's not like that was an overly challenging kick. Wasn't much wind in the stadium, wasn't that long, just was a bad kick. And he really, I mean, it looked like a shanked golf shot, honestly. So that's kind of the one negative from the night, but they were up 21 points, so it really did not hurt them. I'm just trying to think of other takeaways from Sean McDermott today. Nothing else super notable stands out. I mean, he really did like the play of Spector and Dorian Williams. He thought those guys shined. Same thing with Jamarcus Ingram. You know, he spoke pretty highly of some of the other players on the defensive side of the ball, including the defensive line. So, yeah, I mean, it was just a good defensive, dominant day for the Buffalo Bills, and that's a good sign as they sit here at 2-0, a really impressive start to the season. I think you still have a really tough stretch ahead of you. I think the Jags are better than some people think. I guess we'll find out more on Sunday. If I'm a Bills fan, I want the Jags to beat the Browns. I think that's who they play, the Browns. I do not want them coming into Buffalo 0-2 and being incredibly desperate to get a win. I think you want them to be 1-1, and that game is just, you know, a little bit more routine as opposed to them fighting to keep their season alive. But it's at home. It's Monday Night Football. You got the better quarterback. Like, you should be able to win that game. I don't think the Jags are world beaters. For some reason, though, the Bills have had trouble against them. Trevor Lawrence can play. Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. I know some people don't like him. I think that dude can absolutely sling the ball. So I'm not sleeping on the Jags at all. And then you get to that stretch of at Baltimore on Sunday Night Football, at Houston, at the New York Jets on Monday Night Football. Even though they're 2-0, I think if they split their next 4 games, they're in a real good spot. I think if you're sitting there after week 6 and you're 4-2, you really have to like how you started the season, especially getting into a point in the season where things start to dip a little bit. I mean, you get Tennessee at home, you get Seattle on the road, you get Miami at home, but you don't know what's going to be happening with Miami because of all the questions that they have at quarterback. That becomes a little window that you should be able to go on a run. Start it sooner rather than later. That's a good sign. They have the talent to do so, but I think that if you're 4-2, you got to be really, really happy. And I understand they're 2-0 now, but I do know that the tests are getting harder as we get further into the season here. So there's another just quick little episode from this random coffee shop somewhere in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thank you for watching. If you're watching, thank you for listening. If you were listening, and Sal and I will get together to do another like real full episode of the podcast early next week. The Bills are off from now until Wednesday. That's the next time that we'll be at the facility, but we'll touch base before that and get you guys something. So enjoy the weekend. Thanks for watching, and talk to you guys soon.